to all. Welcome to our first broadcast of Knowledge as a Service series, where we provide technical experts to our customers, where we discuss interesting topics, emerging technologies, and other things that might be helpful for your organization, or maybe just something that you were curious about. I'm Shannon Gillenwater, Director of Technology for Mobius Partners. I've been working in technology, providing solutions to our clients for over 20 years, with primarily a focus in networking and security. And I am joined by my colleague, Kyle. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Shannon. Hi, everybody. Kyle Houston with Mobius. Like Shannon, I've been in the industry for quite a while, a little over 20 years now, mainly focused on data center and software-defined data center, and worked with a number of customers and a number of vendors. And really happy to join this Knowledge as a Service series. And I know we're going to get some great discussions in this one, as well as future sessions.
All right, let's not build the expectations too high. Let's let it grow organically as we move along here. So today we are joining to talk about network as a service, right? So of course, these days, pretty much everything is available as a service, right? We have infrastructure as a service, SaaS, platform as a service, right? Storage as a service. And of course, we've got all the cloudy providers out there, like Azure and AWS and Google and the rest of the usual suspects. But we really haven't seen networking as a service take off, or really even be introduced until just very recently. And so when we talk about as a service, one of the two key components of that really makes it as a service, in our opinion, is that it's elastic, right? So I can scale up and I can scale down. I'm only paying for what I'm actually using. So those are the two really key components for something to be as a service for us. And then we're not just talking about a lease, and we're not just talking about managed services, an MSP provider. So we're truly meaning that you're paying for what you're using, and it's not just a financial vehicle. But up until now, we haven't seen that with networking, which of course begs the question, why has it been so slow to join the portfolio of other services out there?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the reason why networking as a service is sort of lagging behind some of the other as a service offerings is that you still have to have, a physical network at your location. Now, if you go into the cloud, obviously you could do as a service there, but they own the entire stack, and it's more of a basically everything as a service when you could talk about cloud, right? But if you want to get into some of that same functionality on-prem, or even in a colo or something that you're managing, it's really kind of hard, because you do have to have that dedicated hardware and stack. So don't confuse network as a service with software-defined networking. Software-defined networking is a way to do that with overlay, underlay, but that's more of a complex scenario. And unless you're doing some very complex things with networking, with self-service and automation and things like that, then it may be a little too much. So luckily, we've seen a couple vendors coming out and doing some capabilities around networking as a service, to where you can still manage everything and not have to put everything out into the cloud, or go the software-defined networking route.
Sure. Yeah. Ultimately, I've got to plug my PC in somewhere, right? I got to have a switch to plug in for my laptop, or if I'm doing Wi-Fi, right? Ultimately, I've got to have some radios in my building to get myself connected. So, the networking is a little bit different than those other technology stacks, because I do have that physical requirement, regardless of how I might want to configure it and use my network. And certainly we have software-defined networking these days, but it has been the last of the technology stacks to undergo massive adoption for software-defined, right? Obviously in the compute, right, with virtualization, especially with VMware, right? So, organizations are probably, 95% or higher virtualized these days. And we see that with storage. We see that with other areas of technology, but we really haven't seen as much adoption of software-defined networking. Certainly, several solutions out there from the big players, no doubt, with VMware and Cisco and others. But we haven't seen that true enterprise-wide adoption of networking as a service, which I think also explains some of the lack of networking as a service options that we've seen out there. And obviously, we have seen two of those providers come into the marketplace, as Kyle had mentioned. And the two do have slightly different approaches. One of those is you're paying for the number of appliances, the number of switches and access points that your organization needs, and you can choose whether to manage those yourself or let them manage them. But you are not paying for upfront acquisition costs, and you can also the management. The other provider, they actually do provide all the equipment, which is their own version of switches and APs that they have developed. So for them, you have to get their equipment, and they do manage it. That is not an option. But there is this even more interesting, because it's truly as a service in that you're paying per users. So as you hire more employees, right, you pay them more per month for that platform. And then as you scale down, right, which we have seen, for example, with the pandemic, then you're going to be paying less paying less because you have fewer users. So they have a true scale up, scale down with a per user cost, which is pretty interesting that they've brought this to the networking realm. And of course, so why would you consider this as a business, right? What would be the benefits of that, versus just going out and doing what we've always done, which is, talk with our partners like Mobius, right, and figure out what the solution is going to be, and buy the gear and get some help installing and maybe even help managing and monitoring it. But like with a lot of the other as a service things, it does have the benefit of no upfront capital outlay, right? No upfront acquisition costs. So you're moving everything to an OpEx versus CapEx, which especially with publicly traded organizations, they certainly like that financial model versus the CapEx. And so in that respect, it is a lot like leasing, giving you those same benefits, right? Not buying it up front and paying for it each month over time. But it also helps our customers get out of the networking business, right? So if they don't have to buy the gear and they don't have to install it and they don't have to manage it, right, they're getting out of the networking business. And obviously, companies don't open up and start offering products and services wanting to be a networking company, right? The networking is something necessary for the businesses to run, but it really shouldn't be a primary focus for them. So like with other areas, it allows them to be less involved in the technology business and more focused on whatever it is that they're trying to bring to market for their customers.
Yeah, I'd like to
another big.
If you don't mind, Shannon, I like to liken this as sort of making it very much like a utility, right? Where you pay for it and it's going to work, much like your electricity. You don't have to go in there and create the generators and turbines and everything to build your own electricity. You just expect it to work. And that's very much what network as a service is like, in that you don't, like Shannon said, you're no longer in the business of doing networking for yourself. You could just pay for a networking utility.
Yeah, absolutely. Although myself and probably a lot of others last year were considering their own turbines to get some electricity during those cold winter months or week that we endured. So certainly a thought that crossed my mind. But for sure, yeah, it's really how a lot of technology should be for businesses these days. It's you pay for a utility just like you need for any other thing for your business, and you shouldn't have to become steeped in that and hire entire groups of people to enable your business to operate in those things that aren't core to your value add as a company. Which is where the elasticity part does come in, right? It helps you match your spend to your business needs, very directly. So the elasticity is that scale up, and scale down. In the past, actually, folks really never thought about networks scaling down. It's not something that really happens very often. Sure, you could have a business maybe that's struggling or downsizing based on changes in their particular market. But generally speaking, networks are always being upgraded. They need to go faster and provide more features and capabilities, more bandwidth, of course, always. But we did see that change recently with the pandemic. So suddenly we had everybody not going to the office and they're working from home. And I know with our customers, they actually stayed with that working model and came up with different flex schedules and actually ended up getting rid of several of their locations or downsizing their footprint in their existing location because of that change in work style. And so, there truly was a need for the ability to scale down networks as a result of that. And so, if you had been someone who was on the leading forefront of networking as a service, you would have had the advantage of being able to reduce your spend and your networking footprint to reflect that without giving up all that investments that have been made in all of your networking gear. Another interesting benefit you can get from this is, evergreen, as we like to call it in technology these days, evergreen networking. So that we're just talking about, right? You always want to upgrade the network. You always want more bandwidth. You want faster. You want more features. You want more security, and certainly those things are always being evolving and changing in the networking stack. And so, if you don't own the equipment and it's being provided and operated for you, then as those generational changes occur in technology, then you have the opportunity to have those switched out and upgraded to the newest access point or switch or whatever the case may be for your business, so you can take advantage of those things. And so that the ability to have evergreen technology around networking certainly becomes an advantage for organizations. So it doesn't mean you have to upgrade whenever the next thing comes out, but when that does happen in the next generation of Wi-Fi 7, for example, when that comes out in a couple of years, currently we're on Wi-Fi 6E as they call it. So when Wi-Fi 7 happens, 3 years from now or whenever that rolls out, that'll be an option for customers who are on networking as a service to get to that new platform. So obviously there's some.
It saves a lot of time having to research newer technologies and stuff, right? If you just rely on the vendor who does networking day in, day out, and that's their specialty, and you just say, yes, I want your service. You just keep me up to date, and then you don't have to worry about that or whatever the newness is, whether it's Wi-Fi 6 versus Wi-Fi 7. It also allows you to get more of the cloud-like feel in that everything is as a service like you would in a public cloud without having to rely on the public cloud, right? There's lots of organizations, lots of restrictions on where data can reside. And there's a lot of, financial or medical or things like that where they just don't trust the data being out in the public cloud. They need to keep a hold of it, right? So that's one way this is one way to further the cloud-like experience, but stay on-prem.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the, often businesses and organizations want to upgrade their technology, whether that's the network or storage or compute or any other part of the environment. And usually, cost is one of the inhibiting factors to, I'd really like that new great shiny thing, but it's out of my budget this year. And if you're subscribing to a service where the cost of that is already rolled in, and it's up to you when the next version rolls out, right? And that's no longer, the cost is no longer the reason you're making the decision to do it. You're choosing to deal with those interruptions in service. Obviously that comes with upgrades, but you get to choose when that happens, and cost is removed from the consideration. You do it when it's time for your business to benefit from whatever those new features and capabilities are. But that doesn't mean it's a fit for all businesses and organizations. So there's some of the same challenges for networking as a service as any of the other ones out there, and even as compared to just say a managed service provider. And particularly, that's going to be things like if you have really complex networking needs in your environment, that's probably not going to be a fit for network as a service, just like it probably wouldn't be a fit for managed services. Obviously, there's some amount of standardization and limitations that you're going to be able to get from having a third party configure and managing your environment. So if you have really complex networking needs, then that might not be an option for you. But as we mentioned earlier, one of the providers that we have seen, they provide the gear for a monthly cost, but you have the choice of them managing or you managing it. So, in that instance, you could potentially still do it with those guys, just you would still be managing it yourself, and you're really just getting the equipment as a monthly fee, and not necessarily all of the management and monitoring like the other provider that we've seen out there. Also, just like with cloudy stuff, if you operate in a high security environment, then networking as a service probably will be less attractive to you, which doesn't mean it can't be done securely, but just obviously, there's more risks with having third parties operate an environment. And so you may have security requirements, you may have contractual requirements, you may have regulatory requirements that make that more of a challenge, just like it does with cloud-based services, as Kyle was mentioning. So anytime you have other people with their hands in the machinery, then obviously security does become a concern. So maybe a little bit more challenging for those businesses where their security posture is a little more rigid. Also, we have to think about things like rate of change. So if your network is changing a lot and you're constantly making changes to it and configuring things, then maybe it's not going to be a good fit for you because it implies that you're relying upon someone else to implement those changes. So it may slow down the speed of business that you want to operate at when you're putting in requests to other folks to make changes for you. And that is the same with other models like managed service providers, right, where everything's a ticket to them to get things done, versus you having a network engineer on staff who can just log in and make changes on the fly, which happens a lot. But also, I would recommend the rapid changes on the fly. As you probably have heard, 70% of most problems are caused by people, not the technology. So always something good to keep in mind.
I think that number is pretty low.
It should be higher. Yeah, and it's pretty high as it is already, and you're right, it probably could be higher, and it fluctuates over the years. But yeah, that is one of the things that we've seen in technology, that when you do root cause analysis, that the people and unauthorized changes or just unknown changes can be very problematic for businesses. Similar to that, also the time to repair, right? TTR. If you are having networking issues, and maybe the network itself isn't even the source of the problem, but if you're having a network issue or you're needing to use the network to troubleshoot an issue, if you're working through a third party to make that happen, right, through the person or say the organization that's managing your network, right? So it can slow down your troubleshooting efforts in the environment. So that is something to consider as well. Just like with changes, are slower, then troubleshooting is going to be a little bit more difficult and slower to get the information you might need as you're working on problems in the environment. So be something to consider as well. But certainly networking as a service, it is real. It is here today with us. It could be a fit for your business. If you think so, or if you have questions about that, reach out to us. Let us help you in making that assessment and figuring out if it's the right fit for you, and if so, who might be the best solution provider for you to accomplish that. Do we have any questions out from our folks in cyberspace that we'd like to bubble up into the session?
We do have a couple. One of them was, does that mean they're also responsible for the security of my network?
So I'll give the half answer of yes, but so they are definitely going to be instrumental to the security of your network, right? Because they're managing and making the changes for you, but it certainly doesn't alleviate your responsibility for security, right? So ultimately, security is still going to be owned by you and will be part of that. But it also, a lot of times in their head, folks combine networking and security together, which probably in the early days, that was usually the case. Security was always a network-based function, right? The first security thing, being the firewall at the edge, and right. So a lot of times folks still lump security and networking together, but the reality is, right, security is everywhere and in every part of the environment, both in the hardware and in the software and processes. And so from that perspective, you can't look at managed networking as a service to also be providing you with the security you need. You still need to separately ask yourself, what are my security needs and how am I providing those in a network is certainly a part of that, but certainly not all of that. Any others out there, or did I miss anything there, Kyle?
No, I think you nailed it. It'll offset some of the security stuff, but obviously the bulk is going to rely on you. You know, you are the last line of defense. You're the one that's going to be ultimately responsible at the end. But they can definitely help on the networking side.
Indeed. Any other questions out there, Liz?
One more question. Does this mean that I need to replace my existing network?
Yes, that's maybe not in all cases, but for the most part, the answer to that is yes, which maybe does make it seem more daunting. But like as I mentioned, like with most providers, if they provide their own equipment that they have actually designed and manufactured it. So for those guys, no doubt you have to get their gear and you have to have it managed. But the other one, they're providing things that you choose yourself, but it's still coming from their portfolio of products. So your choices there are still limited to what they offer within their program. But still, ultimately, it really does mean that you will be replacing gear for both of those models. And so you really have to time it, best to time it such that you're ready to do your next generation of upgrade in the network, whether that's because it's it's aging out, it's end of life support, or maybe it's because you're moving locations, opening new locations. So those same turning points in your business, the technology life cycle that you would be upgrading and replacement devices is the perfect time to consider and approach networking as a service to take advantage of that. But the short answer is yes, you probably have to upgrade and replace the networking components. And something I didn't mention earlier on is that so far what we've seen with networking as a service is geared towards the campus LAN, right? So this switches and access points where the end users connect. So far we haven't really seen as much offering in the data center, which doesn't mean it probably won't evolve to include that. But the first round of offerings that we've seen out there are really for the campus LAN, not the data center itself. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. If you have suggestions for future topics, email us at info@mobiuspartners.com. Also, you can follow us on LinkedIn for more stuff. Thanks a lot for joining and enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone.